I wonder who the real cannibals are.
My name is Philipp.
And I'm Thomas, and welcome to the first episode of the Wertow podcast.
The English version of the Wertow podcast.
I think you can stop playing now.
But this is your own fault. You should have known that if there is a guitar in the room with me while we are talking about Cannibal Holocaust, which is of course the movie we are talking about, I cannot resist playing it. But yes, Tom, what is the movie you have decided to talk about with me today?
Well, you already mentioned it's Cannibal Holocaust from the year 1980. It's a classic cannibal found footage style for the most part of the movie. A very controversial horror film. Even in the horror community, it's very controversial for its real animal killings that the movie shows. So the director and the crew killed animals in front of the camera just for the movie. They claimed they ate them afterwards, but
Well, why shouldn't you believe them? I mean, Ruggero
Yeah.
Deodato, I think is the name. I'm probably pronouncing it incorrectly. Well, I don't know. He seems to be a nice person to me from all the interviews. And of course, we have also in the German version of the Wertow podcast talked with, this one guy who has actually met him. What's the name of the guy again we talked with? We were talking about
Clemens.
Yeah. And his last name was not mentioned in the podcast, but yes, I know that he has met him, and he also has quite nice things to say about him. He's dead. He died, I think, last year. And yes, are we going to speak about the controversial and maybe ethically problematic nature of this movie immediately, or are you going to introduce us to the story? What's the plan here, Tom?
Yeah, I think I just talk about the story real quick. It's about an anthropologist, I think, who goes into the jungle where cannibals live, a tribe of cannibal lives, and there he finds a movie camera and footage of a crew of documentary filmmakers that went to this jungle to film a documentary about the cannibals. And when he returns back to New York or wherever, he looks at the footage and sees how gruesome and brutal it is. And the producers or who own the footage or who wanted to make the documentary or whatever, they still want to use the footage, but then they show it to them, and the more gruesome and brutal and horrible it gets, the more they are convinced to just get rid of the footage, burn it, never show it. And we as the audience, we see the footage as well as the reaction of the producers, and in the end they decide to destroy it. And the anthropologist says the quote that I said at the beginning, I wonder who the real cannibals are. A bit on the nose, but still a nice ending in my opinion.
Well, I have a few things to say about this. First, I know that M by Fritz Lang is one of your favorite movies, but you don't have to repeat the title over and over again. So my advice to you is to speak a little slower. And well, what I can say about Cannibal Holocaust, it's maybe my favorite scene, even the ending when all of these people, the producers, sit there in complete silence after the movie ended, and then they say, burn everything. And it's such a great meme for basically every movie that I ever made because this was basically always the reaction when I watched one of my movies with a live audience. So yes, someone should make a few memes out of this material from Cannibal Holocaust. So maybe I'm just going to say what I think about this film. I think it's an quite amazing film, and well, it's actually composed out of two movies, I would say. There's this found footage stock that we see, and that's, I think, really the amazing part, because it looks infamously so realistic. I mean, of course, the animal cruelty is real, and I do condemn it, because the animals were actually, kind of tortured to death. Well, for example, the turtle. Then, on the other hand, there's a pig, for example, and the pig is just shot in the head. And I think that's actually not worse than how animals are treated in like big production companies and so on. So in a sense, it's, I think, even more ethical to slaughter a pig who has had maybe a nice life in nature, in freedom, blah blah blah, and so on. Shoot it, don't torture it. It's a quick, fast death, and afterward it gets eaten. And it also is in the movie, and we see the death of this animal in the movie, which could actually contribute to people watching this film rethink their own habit about eating meat. And that's something that's actually quite interesting to me, that we have, of course, those documentaries where we see how animals get tortured to death in some construction, I don't know what, who get killed in a very inhumane way. And the result of this is that people watch these gruesome documentaries, then think, oh my god, at least I have now confronted myself with all of this in, yes, I don't know, 1.5 hours or something like that. And now I can go on and maybe eat a little bit less meat and so on, but at least I'm educated now. While I think having real animal deaths in fiction, in fictitious movies, where it catches you out of nowhere, is actually might be more effective for people to turn them off from eating meat. So maybe it's, I don't know, maybe it's even more ethical to put a real animal death in a movie instead of just killing the pig and then eating it without putting the death scene into the movie. And just a personal note, if I die and someone films this, which I would be extremely thankful for, I would be quite honored to have my own death in a movie. Maybe in a movie by Lars von Trier or Marion Dora or something like that. I would be pretty happy. Yes. All right, what do you think about all of this?
Yeah, you mentioned some interesting points, of course, with the real animal cruelty. I tend to agree that it's probably more ethical to kill these animals in a humane, quick, fast way for the movie than to let them suffer their entire lives in some really small place for them or whatever, like the big industrial animal farmers. Yes. So what I also wanted to say about this film, because I also really like it, is that it gets kind of a bad reputation nowadays, at least as far as I've seen, from people that put it into a similar category as, for example, a Serbian film, which I personally haven't seen, but I've literally heard nothing positive about this film ever, basically.
Well, I've heard the score, the music, it's amazing. I can also play it on the guitar. I'll start immediately. No,
Okay.
I'm just kidding.
Okay, I don't know about the music, maybe it's good. But yeah, what really bothers me with that is that I think Cannibal Holocaust is not only a brutal horror film with lots of great gore effects, so realistic, by the way, you mentioned it, how realistic it is, that the director was even charged with murder because people thought that the real deaths, so like the deaths of the humans in the movie, were also real, and he had to prove in court that the actors were still alive, which is another amazing piece of trivia about this film. Where did I left off? Oh yeah,
I can help you out, Tom. Listen to this.
stethoscope sounding film.
That's quite cool. All right. I don't have the copyrights for this.
Yeah, okay, what I wanted to say is that I think Cannibal Holocaust is an actual good film. So not only looking at the horror and shock value of it, but it's genuinely a well-made film with some terrifying sequences. We're not only horrified of the cannibals, but we're even more horrified of the documentary filmmakers who we see rape some of the cannibals or burn down an entire village. And that's where the title Cannibal Holocaust, of course, really comes into play, because it's the Western, quote-unquote, civilized people that are actually performing the Holocaust, so to speak, in this movie. And people that look down at this film for its shock value, or because they say, oh, it's just cheap thrills and blood and gore and the message is surface level or even hypercritical, I think they don't really understand that, in my opinion, that's exactly what the filmmakers want you to think about this film, because this film does condemn the sensationalism of media, of films that show all this cruelty, of filmmakers that, as we see in the movie, for example, hurt or torture or even rape the cannibals just to get a good shot for their documentary. And yeah, what people criticize is this hypocrisy with the animal deaths, like showing real animal deaths, killing animals for the film, and then also criticizing at the same point the filmmakers in the film for doing similarly cruel things. But as we've stated, the animal cruelty in this film is somewhat ethical, at least. Maybe that's a topic for discussion, but in my opinion at least. And that's where I think the meaning of the film gets lost for so many people that criticize it, even though that just means that the film is doing exactly what it sets out to do. It's to shock you and to say at the same time, or to show you at the same time, I should say, that this sensationalism is hurtful. But they of course do it with special effects for the most part, instead of really doing any harm, except for the animals again.
Yes, I mean, the animal deaths, if you really look at it, are probably not worse than what animals have to suffer before they get into our chicken McNuggets or something like that. I mean, we just have to be honest on this one. Except for this little mammal, I don't exactly know what it is, but some guy just puts out like a switchblade and puts it through the face of this animal. And that's like really crazy. And well, I don't know. I don't know really. At the same time, if there are people out there who eat meat, they just have to shut up about the animal cruelty in this film. But on the other hand, even though I would not exactly condemn the animal cruelty at the same level that most people would, and again, I do condemn it, but just not on the same level. Of course, I think it's objectionable, it's actually wrong. But where I do see this hypocrisy is even in the aesthetics. So the aesthetic level itself, I think, is contradictory, because you should look at a filmmaker like Michael Haneke. In a film like Funny Games, he actually does critique the way that audience is looking at violence in cinema and so on. And then in Funny Games, which is so brilliant, is that, for example, when the child gets shot and so on, spoiler by the way for Funny Games, Haneke just moves away with the camera with one of the other killers. This other killer goes into the kitchen, makes himself bread, something to eat, and then we hear the gunshot just in the background. The killer looks up, what's going on there? And then he goes back with his bread, eating the bread, and we see the child is lying dead somewhere in the corner. And so this violence is extremely harsh and brutal and gut-wrenching, but we never actually see it. So there is never any sensationalism about it. And that's the completely other way around in Cannibal Holocaust, where the camera is zooming in on everything, and it is disgusting. I mean, it's disgusting in the way it's filmed, in the aesthetic sense. It's really pornographic. I mean, the violence in this movie is shot like a penetration in a porn or something like that. And yes, I do not like this. I think, for example, if Haneke would have made this movie, it would be a real masterpiece. But in this sense, Cannibal Holocaust is very self-contradictory.
But that's exactly the point I'm trying to make, right? So the film condemns all this sensationalism, but is also made in a very sensationalistic way, like it just stated.
Yes. How is that not self-contradicting?
It's not self-contradictory because you are supposed to be repulsed by the film itself. You are supposed to look at this film and almost vomit by how awfully it is made. Like, that's at least what I think. The people that get the overall message of the film, maybe we're the real cannibals and so on. Yeah, it's a bit, as I said, on the nose and may not be very effective. But then when you actually film the movie in a way that repulses the audience, that's when you actually drill that message that you want to convey into their brains. Because you don't just say to them, well, yeah, all the things that those people in the film do is terrible or whatever, but you show actually how terrible it is. So the film kind of, it takes a bullet to convey its own point.
Yes, my question is, how often have you seen this film?
Once.
Oh, okay. So, alright, I'll give you that. Maybe it works that way for you. I have seen it twice. So this already shows that there has to be something wrong with this, because people are watching this film over and over. So what, are they not getting the message? I think they do get it. I think they just don't really care about it because they get turned on by violence. But
that's hardly the film's fault, I'd say. I think
it is the film's fault. It truly is the film's fault, because there are movies who manage to be completely gut-wrenching and really horrifying without ever sensationalizing the violence in any way. For example, Funny Games by Michael Haneke. That's a movie where many people left the cinema when it came out in Cannes and so on, although you basically never see any on-screen violence. The only shot where you really do see on-screen violence gets famously reversed by the characters themselves, and then this moment in the movie plays out again, but without the violence. And this is where the audience was really pissed at Haneke, that he didn't include violence against the villains in the movie and so on. So this is, like, I think, a very interesting way of how to shock the audience without ever sensationalizing the violence, because you cannot really masturbate, I would say, to a movie like Funny Games, because Funny Games is the opposite of porn. Funny Games always moves away with the camera whenever something pornographic happens and only shows the emotional side of it and the theoretical side of it. On the other hand, we have something like Cannibal Holocaust, where this movie, there are definitely people out there who watch this and jerk off about it. And that's, of course, also totally okay. But it's just the absolute opposite, I think, of what the director, Ruggero Deodato, actually wanted to convey with this. So I think he shot himself in his own foot by sensationalizing the violence and then saying, oh, it's bad to sensationalize violence in a movie. It just is self-contradictory.
But the fact that you're talking about how sensationalistic Cannibal Holocaust is and how bad that is, is kind of proving my point in saying that that's exactly what the film wants to say.
Well,
It's
no,
a
we
difficult
are
subject, I
two
think.
intelligent theorists who can now talk about this. This doesn't mean that the movie is doing a good job. I mean, you can also say that the Emoji Movie is about freedom of expression and so on, but it fucks it up so bad that it's actually the opposite. And I think this is what's going on here. We can talk about Emoji Movie on another episode, of course, but, well,
I'd definitely rather watch Cannibal Holocaust again than the fucking Emoji Movie, but
oh,
whatever.
me too. I can already see it. Emoji Movie is going to be the new running gag, the new meme of this channel. We are going to yes, talk shit about the Emoji Movie all day. And I think at the, I don't know, 100th episode or something, we can actually talk about it. Yes, but what I wanted to say is, what I'm actually disgusted about, what I was frightened of in this movie, is the director and his insane visions about rape and violence and all of this shit. I mean, I was watching this movie the first time with the famous and infamous Austrian director Ambro El Tatario, of course, and we were eating pizza simultaneously, and I was nearly vomiting, I have to say it, and I actually had a headache after watching this movie. I was really yes, how can I even say this? I was impressed actually by this film, and I even called an actress friend of mine and so on and said, "Oh my god, we just watched Cannibal Holocaust. This was so fucking crazy. I've literally a headache. I mean, I can feel it on a physical level, the impact of this movie." So, yes, overall, it is impactful, but as I've said, it's self-contradictory, and you cannot change this fact, Tom. I mean, you can try a little bit longer, but yes, go.
I mean, I think we're just on different sides of this debate this time. I don't think there's much point in discussing this any longer. I mean, I definitely understand where you're coming from in saying that it's self-contradictory.
Thompson,
But, yeah,
what's your favorite scene of the movie?
my favorite scene. It's difficult to say. I mean, I love the scene where they burn down the village because it's so repulsive and horrible and really probably had the most emotional impact on me personally.
And then they put in this beautiful
Yeah,
music.
this very beautiful
Amazing.
music that's playing a bunch of times in the film, and in this scene it fits so well because it contrasts this horror that we're seeing on screen. Another one of the scenes that really stood out to me, because it's one of the very few beautiful moments, despite how weird it still is when you look at it from a Western perspective, I should say, is when the anthropologist goes to the jungle and there are a bunch of children of the cannibalistic tribe, and he strips himself down completely naked and he goes swimming with them, and it's weird but also kind of beautiful at the same time because he indulges the culture of this tribe. But of course, for us, it just looks like an old naked man wanting to swim with a bunch of minors.
Well, I don't know if they're actually minors. I mean, they look like young women. I mean, whatever. I mean, he's not touching them or anything. I think it's all right. He's just kind of a nudist in the context of this tribe, and yes, I think that's okay. I would say one of my absolute favorite scenes also is, of course, I mean, the woman who is put on a stick, and this stick seems to go through her asshole and out of her mouth, and the film crew is in front of this monument, and one of the one of the people from the crew is laughing about it, is making jokes about it, and then the cameraman is saying, watch it, I'm already rolling, I'm already shooting, and so on. And then he quickly changes his expression on his face and says, oh my god, it's horrible. I can't understand this cruelty. It's really a great scene, I think. And I also love the scene when the anthropologist, I think, is watching some older documentary from this film crew, and there it's also about torture and so on, and there we actually do see real executions and real images of torture, also underlaid with this music, but not with the opening music that I played on the guitar, but with probably my second favorite piece, definitely my second favorite, or maybe even my favorite from this entire movie. It's called The Crucified Woman, and it's this deeply sad score that's just so touching, but also, I mean, it's completely manipulative of the movie to show real executions, putting this music on over it. But then at the end, they are reflecting a little bit about the nature of this documentary, the nature of how the scenes that we were just shown as audience, how manipulative it is. And then one of the guys actually says that the director of these images has actually paid for some of the executions and so on. He has paid the terrorists who were doing these terrible things and so on to get good images, good footage for the movie. And so, of course, this movie is very critical, but it shoots itself in the foot. Well, we can talk about this all day, but I would say we could come to our final statements about this film. Tom, if you have nothing to say anymore about it, and I think the discussion, of course, can go on in the comment space section and whatever. Yes, Tom, what do you think?
Well, I think it's become quite clear that I'm a fan of this film. I think it's a really great horror film, one of the most emotionally impactful horror films I've seen. Definitely, as you said, it actually can make you physically sick watching this film, which I think is an amazing accomplishment.
My god, but every movie can do this. Two Girls, One Cup can do this.
Yeah. Not on this level, I know.
Tom, I could shit on the table right now and it could do this. And even for the listeners, just the voices, the sounds of someone shitting on the table could make many people sick. But whatever, continue. I don't want to interrupt you, sorry.
Okay, anyways, I think not many, especially, I wouldn't exactly call this movie mainstream, but it is fairly well known, at least in the horror community. And yeah, I think it gets sometimes unfairly a bad reputation for being just a cheap shock fest, but I actually think it has artistic value. And I actually recommend watching this film at least once if you think you can handle it.
I don't know, I would recommend watching Michael Haneke movies first, of course. And if you then have time to watch something like this, you can watch it to see how not to do it. But I will say one thing, I'm a huge advocate of cannibalism, of course. I'm a huge fan of cannibalism. We can talk about this subject matter in some other episodes, so stay tuned. And what can I say? How can I get out of this sentence? This is a reference to Lars von Trier, of course. But
let's go Holocaust.
No, Tom, please stop it. And on another point, the Holocaust actually never. I'm not gonna deny the Holocaust, of course. I did this in another episode, so in the German one, this was also a joke. Okay, now I really don't know what to say anymore. Please stop it and excuse my bad English.